I used to think betrayal was a big, dramatic event. You know, like in the movies, a lipstick stain on a collar, a phone left unlocked with incriminating texts, a mysterious late-night phone call from a stranger. The kind of thing that hits you like a lightning strike. But my story of betrayal wasn't like that at all. It was quiet. It was subtle. It was like a slow leak under a floorboard, something you don't even notice until the whole room starts to smell like rot. And you realize the damage has been happening for a long, long time. Michael and I had been together for years. To everyone on the outside, we were the perfect couple. We got the "you guys are so cute together" comments all the time. He was the life of the party, charming, funny, radiating a confidence that drew everyone in. He had this way of turning every room into his personal stage, and I was happy to be his adoring audience. And me? I was the girl who believed that love meant being patient, understanding, and above all, forgiving. I thought that was my role, the cornerstone of our relationship. But then, the little things started. Tiny, almost imperceptible shifts in our dynamic that felt off. It started with his phone. It would buzz, and he'd flinch, a tiny, almost invisible reaction. But I saw it. Suddenly, his phone, which used to be just another object lying around our apartment, became a fortress. He guarded his privacy like it was Fort Knox. He'd get a call and say, "Oh, it's just work," before stepping outside to take it. But these work calls would last for an hour, sometimes longer, far longer than any work he actually did. His work from home schedule became filled with these mysterious, urgent meetings that always required him to be somewhere else. I started to ask questions, but I did it gently at first. I kept my tone light, casual, peppering my curiosity with a laugh, hoping I was just being paranoid. I wanted so badly to be wrong. I'd say something like, "Wow, work is really demanding lately, huh?" Or, "Who was that? You seemed stressed." And every single time, he'd have the same response. He'd laugh, a smooth, dismissive sound. He'd wrap his arm around me, kiss my forehead, and say those 4 words that became my poison. "Baby, you're overthinking." And because I loved him, because trusting him felt so much easier than confronting the terrifying alternative, I believed him. I wanted to believe him. I chose to believe him. It was a conscious decision to push my own intuition aside for the sake of peace. But the real pain, the deep, gut-wrenching ache, wasn't just the suspicion. It was the loneliness. It was the feeling of being completely and utterly alone while lying right next to the person I loved. Our deep, winding conversations that used to last for hours dwindled into transactional exchanges about groceries and bills. Our date nights, once a sacred ritual, turned into quick, silent dinners where his eyes were glued to his watch, not me. The space between us in bed felt like it was growing wider every single night, an invisible canyon I couldn't cross. I was loving a man who felt like a ghost. He was physically there, but his mind, his heart, his essence, it was somewhere else entirely. And still, I kept trying. I thought if I just loved him a little harder, if I was a little more patient, a little more understanding, I could bring him back. I'd plan special dinners he'd be too tired for. I'd buy him little gifts he'd barely acknowledge. I was pouring all of my energy into a bottomless pit, trying to fill a void that wasn't mine to fill. I didn't know it yet, but with every attempt to fix us, I was just stepping closer to the devastating truth that was already burning everything down behind me. The silence was getting louder, and I was about to find out why. The breaking point wasn't a single event, but a slow, crushing realization. The constant anxiety was eating me alive. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. My own life started to feel like a performance. I was playing the part of the happy, trusting girlfriend, but behind the scenes, I was a detective in my own home, looking for clues I desperately hoped I wouldn't find. The emotional distance became a physical one. He started spending more nights at a friend's place after a supposed argument we never really had. He'd create phantom fights just to have an excuse to leave. The excuses were so flimsy, so transparent, yet I let them happen. The fear of being alone was still greater than the pain of being lied to. Or so I thought. One evening, he was in the shower. His phone, which was usually glued to his side, was on the nightstand. It lit up, just a notification. I told myself not to look. For weeks, I had resisted this temptation. But that night, the loneliness was too heavy. The silence in the apartment was deafening. I picked it up. My hands were shaking. I didn't even know his password, but my fingers moved on their own, trying a combination of numbers I thought were significant to us. Our anniversary. It didn't work. My birthday. It didn't work. Then I tried a date I knew was significant to him, the day he got his big promotion at work. It opened, and there it was. Not hidden deep in some secret folder, but right there on the screen. A string of messages from a name I didn't recognize. The messages weren't just flirty. They were intimate. They were planning a future. They were talking about me, referring to me as the obstacle or the roommate. They had pet names for each other. They were living a whole other life, a life I was not a part of. The world didn't just stop. It shattered. Every I love you, every shared laugh, every promise for the future replayed in my mind. But this time, they were tainted, warped into lies. The lipstick on the collar would have been a kindness compared to this. This was a systematic dismantling of our entire history. I felt nothing at first, just a cold, hollow emptiness. The smell of rot I'd been sensing for months was suddenly explained. The foundation of my life hadn't just sprung a leak, it had completely rotted away, and I was about to fall through. I placed the phone back on the nightstand, exactly as I had found it. I walked into the living room and sat on the couch, staring at the blank TV screen. When he came out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, smiling, and asked what I wanted for dinner, the sound of his voice made my skin crawl. The man I loved was a stranger. The man I had built a life with was a fiction. The quiet betrayal was over. It was a Thursday, the day I always picked him up from the airport after his work trips. He wasn't answering my calls, which felt strange, but I figured his phone had died or he was rushing through security. I drove anyway, the familiar route feeling a little off, like the calm before a storm. I waited at the arrivals gate, scanning the crowd, my usual little thrill of seeing his face again turning into a knot of anxiety. He never showed. Panic started to creep in, cold and sharp. I called his coworker, trying to keep my voice casual, pretending to ask about a project they were supposedly working on together. His coworker sounded so confused. Michael? He hasn't traveled for work this month. He's been in the office all week. The phone felt heavy in my hand. My heart didn't just drop. It plummeted. The world tilted on its axis, and everything I thought was solid ground suddenly felt like quicksand. I drove home in a complete, deafening silence. The only sound, the frantic pounding of my own heartbeat, like a warning siren I had ignored for too long. When I walked into our apartment, the first thing I heard was laughter. A woman's laughter. It wasn't loud or boisterous. It was soft, comfortable, and sickeningly familiar with the space, like she'd laughed in that room many times before. I froze at the doorway, my breath catching in my chest, my body refusing to move. And then I saw them. Michael, and a woman I had met 3 times before. A woman he had introduced as just a friend. Her bright red nails were a stark contrast against the white couch. Her heels were still on, and her jacket was draped over my favorite chair as if it belonged there. My keys slipped from my numb hand and clattered onto the floor. The sound was so small, yet it shattered the entire scene. They both looked up, their eyes wide with shock. He jumped up like a guilty teenager caught doing something wrong, scrambling for excuses that didn't exist, his words a jumbled mess of lies. She pulled a blanket over herself, mumbling something about needing to leave, her face a mask of shame. But my eyes never left him. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. The rage I thought I would feel wasn't there. The betrayal was too deep, too absolute for something as simple as anger. It felt like someone had reached directly into my chest, grabbed hold of my heart, and twisted everything I believed about love, loyalty, and my own worth into something unrecognizable. I turned around and walked out without a word. He ran after me, shouting my name, his voice filled with a fake desperation, as if I were the one abandoning him. The irony of it was so thick it almost made me laugh. He was the one who had shattered our world, yet he was calling my name like I was the one walking away without reason. That night, I drove with no destination in mind. The city lights blurred into long streaks of color through my tears. I let the cold air whip against my face, trying to numb the ache that was spreading through my entire body. The tears fell silently. There were no sobs, no gasps for air. It was a quiet, profound grief. And in that car, driving aimlessly through the dark, I realized I wasn't mourning him. I wasn't mourning the loss of the man I loved. I was mourning the version of myself that had trusted him so completely, so blindly. I was mourning the woman who believed in the life we were building, a life that turned out to be a carefully constructed lie. The days that followed were a blur. Friends and family rallied around me, their words of support like a soft blanket. They said all the right things. You're better off. He didn't deserve you. You'll find someone so much better. And while I knew they were right, their words couldn't reach the hollow space inside me. Because this wasn't just about a breakup. It was about the complete dismantling of my reality. Every memory we had ever made was now tainted. Every I love you he had ever said now felt like a script he was reading. Was any of it real? I had to learn to trust my own judgment again. It's a slow process, unlearning the habit of second-guessing your own intuition. For so long, I had pushed down the little voice that whispered something was wrong. The late-night work calls, the sudden secrecy with his phone, the vague answers about his trips. I had chosen to believe the fantasy because the truth was too painful to consider. But the truth has a way of coming out, whether you're ready for it or not. This experience, as devastating as it was, became a turning point. It forced me to look at myself, to rebuild my foundation, not on someone else's promises, but on my own strength. I started doing things for me again. I reconnected with old friends, picked up hobbies I had let slide, and slowly, piece by piece, I began to find the woman I was before him. A woman who was confident, who trusted her gut, and who knew her own worth wasn't determined by someone else's inability to see it. It's a long road, healing from a betrayal like that. Some days are harder than others. A song on the radio, a familiar street corner, a fleeting scent can bring it all rushing back. But now, when I look back at that Thursday, I don't just see the pain. I see the moment I was set free. I was freed from a lie, freed from a person who was incapable of love and respect, and freed to build a life that is authentically and unapologetically my own. And the woman I am today? She's stronger, wiser, and she'll never again silence that warning siren inside her own heart. Thank you for letting me share this with you. If you've been through something similar, know that you are not alone, and the strength to rebuild is already inside you. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories and reflections on life, love, and finding our way back to ourselves. The days that followed felt like learning how to breathe again. Every breath was a conscious effort, a tiny victory against the weight in my chest. I started with small, decisive actions. I blocked his number. The constant buzz of my phone, the hope and dread with each notification, had to stop. Then, I packed my things. Each item I put into a box felt like a piece of a life I was shedding, a life that wasn't truly mine anymore. Moving in with my sister was a lifesaver. Her home was a sanctuary, a quiet place where I could just be, without judgment, without having to explain the tears that would come at random moments. Of course, he tried everything. The apologies started flooding in, long, rambling texts that filled my screen. They were followed by voicemail essays, his voice, a desperate plea I could barely recognize. He even showed up outside my sister's house, a ghost from a past I was trying so hard to escape. But betrayal isn't a broken plate you can just glue back together. The cracks always show. It's more like a stain, a deep, indelible mark that sinks into the very fabric of your trust and never quite lifts, no matter how hard you scrub. It changes the color of everything. Really listen. I tuned into the quiet parts, the whispers of my own needs that I had silenced for so long. I had made myself smaller, and I hadn't even realized it until he was gone and I was left with all this empty space. So, I decided to fill that space with me. I started journaling, pouring all the tangled thoughts and raw emotions onto the page. I reconnected with friends I'd drifted away from, the ones I hadn't seen in months because I was so busy trying to be the perfect partner. Their laughter, Their support, it was like watering a plant that had been deprived of sunlight. Slowly, painfully, and then beautifully, I felt myself returning. It was like watching a time lapse of a flower blooming. At first, it's a struggle, a fight against the dirt, but then it breaks through, and it unfurls, petal by petal. I felt myself getting stronger, not in a hard, brittle way, but in a resilient, flexible way. I was becoming wiser, learning to see the red flags I had once called passion. I was becoming softer in the right places, more compassionate with myself, and harder where I needed boundaries, building fences where there had only been open gates before. One afternoon, while sorting through an old box, I found a photo of us. It was from a summer vacation, a few years back. He was smiling that wide, charming smile that used to make my heart skip a beat. And I was leaning into him, my head on his shoulder, looking at him like he was my entire world, like he was home. A wave of memory washed over me, but for the first time, it didn't pull me under. The familiar sting of tears didn't come. I held the picture for a moment, and then I whispered to it, "You were never my home. You were just a place I stayed for far too long." That was the moment. The click, the turning point where everything shifted into focus. I realized I didn't lose anything of value. I escaped. I broke out of a prison I had helped build. This story, my story, isn't really about cheating. The betrayal was just the catalyst, the loud alarm that finally woke me up from a long, deep sleep. This story is about what happens after you wake up. It's about the journey of learning that true love should never, ever require you to dim your own light just to keep someone else warm. Your brightness shouldn't be a threat to them. It should be something they celebrate. It's about choosing yourself, even when it's the hardest thing you will ever do. Even when it feels like you're tearing your own heart out. Choosing yourself is the ultimate act of love. And today, after all the tears, the walks, the journaling, the rebuilding, I finally know what love is supposed to feel like. It's not a chaotic storm or a desperate chase. It's safe, it's honest, it's steady. It feels like coming home to a place that was built just for you, by you. And it starts with me. Thank you for listening to my story. If you're going through something similar, please be gentle with yourself. The journey back to you is the most important one you'll ever take. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about healing and finding your way back home.